found myself standing in the aisle of Walgreens with a pregnancy test in my hand. I was 20 years old and I had just completed my sophomore year of college. I use the term completed loosely because my GPA was 2.6 and I had just received a letter from SIU in Carbondale stating I was at risk of failing out of college. I was, however, getting a 4.0 and partying. And I was broke, so broke that I could not even afford that pregnancy test. But my best friend, who was also a broke college student but a bit more devious than I, she stole it for me. In 1988, it took about 20 minutes to learn the results of a pregnancy test. I peed on the stick. 15 minutes later, it came back positive. There's no way. Something had to go wrong. I mean, just because I had been spotting for 2 months and on my 3rd month I had no period at all, denial is a strong thing. It was a good thing those tests came in a 2-pack. I drank more water, peed on the stick, waited with my hands clenched. 10 minutes later, it came back positive. I was pregnant. Tears began to build in my eyes, and my stomach balled up as I began to run through my options. Abortion, adoption, or keep. Those options ran around on my head as if they were on a hamster wheel. My best friend sat next to me on the couch as I clutched a pillow and cried over the pros and cons of each one. She listened quietly, and after an hour of solid sobbing, I made a decision that scared me so much, but it was the only one that I could live with. I decided to keep that baby. Now, I did have a long-term boyfriend at the time, and he was the father of my child, but I had made a decision that summer to break up with him because at 20, I was really confused about being in love or just loving someone. See, I loved lots of things. I loved Mel Gibson. I mean, remember this was the 80s, he was okay to love back then. I loved ice cream. I loved summer, but I wasn't in love with those things. And as the idea of being pregnant and being a mom settled inside of me, it became very clear that I didn't want to be a wife. I was not in love with my boyfriend. So in the same breath, with tears streaming down my face, I told him he was going to be a father and that we were breaking up. I waited until right before I went back to college to tell my parents. They were angry, hurt, disappointed. They told me that they would pay for that fall semester of school, but after that, I was on my own. I wasn't surprised by their reaction. I had learned a long time ago that I could not count on them to help me, but I'm not going to lie. It hurt, and especially since my friends' parents were reaching out with love and support. I was supposed to move into an off-campus apartment with a girlfriend, but a baby was not part of that plan, so I ended up moving back into the dorms, and because it was so late, I had to move into an end lounge with 8 other girls. I felt like a fly dangling in a spider web. I was tearful all the time because of my pregnancy hormones and self-conscious because my body was going through all sorts of crazy things. And it didn't help that I was whispered and talked about all the time in the cafeteria, although I was the only pregnant girl in the dorms. And the end lounge kept having a bed bug infestation. So I would have to evacuate and find a place to sleep in order for them to come in and fumigate. In my 6th month, I started to bleed. In a panic, my friends rushed me to the hospital, and the doctors told me that my placenta was starting to separate. So my unplanned pregnancy had a new name, high risk. But they told me as long as I remained on bed rest for 2 weeks, and then after those 2 weeks, all I did was walk back and forth to class, that everything should be fine. My friends rallied around me. They brought me all my meals, they brought me all my homework. Someone even donated a really small black and white TV, with the rabbit ear antennas. One night, after all my roommates were asleep, I was laying in a fetal position in my bunk bed with hot tears streaking down my face. I was watching a very fuzzy picture of David Letterman and trying to make myself laugh, but it didn't work. My heart was aching because I felt so lost and so alone. Even though I had broken up with my boyfriend, it was still a loss because we had been really good friends. And even though I knew I couldn't count on my parents for comfort, I didn't expect that they would barely speak to me. And in a few short months, I was going to be on my own with a baby. I had given a lot of thought to what I was going to do, but in that moment, I felt desperation and liberation collide. I finally admitted that I was messed up. I had been making risky decisions and letting past pain interfere with present happiness. I decided that I would not fail out of college, and more importantly, I would not fail as a mom. So even though I was really scared, I became a machine. I put myself in counseling. I got on public aid and food stamps and WIC. I filled out paperwork so that I could get grants and loans to continue my college education. On the last day of the semester, I found a cheap furnished one-bedroom apartment. I signed the lease, started cleaning it, and the next morning, I went into labor. My daughter came early, but she was the biggest preemie on the ward at 5 pounds, 12 ounces. She had a full head. She had a full head of black hair, her dad, and chubby red cheeks, me. And for the first time, I knew what it felt like to be in love with someone. I had never changed a baby's diaper before. I had never even fed a baby. But all the nurses were so kind, and they coached me, correcting me in a gentle way so I could learn how to take care of my daughter, Angelica. She had to remain in the hospital for a week, but that gave me time to get a crib and other baby essentials. See, my friends had thrown me a baby shower, but these were college students who thought it was a better idea to get us a 6-foot stuffed giraffe and a bottle of tequila rather than diapers and onesies. I brought Angelica home in a dark blue and white sleeper, boys' clothes, because that's all I could find in her size with the clothing voucher I got from a local church. I quickly realized why my apartment was so cheap. Roaches. They were everywhere, and these were Southern Illinois roaches. When I'd wake up in the morning, they'd be on our bodies, and I'd have to bat them off of us. When I put Angelica to bed, I put a little hat on her head, and I wrapped a sheet around mine because I was so scared they were going to crawl into our ears at night. I was being terrorized by roaches on a daily basis, and I was too poor to move. This was a low point in my life. I, at times, felt hopeless and depressed. But once again, my friends rallied around me and lifted my spirits. I lived in Carbondale for 8 months, learning how to be a mom and bonding with Angelica. Those months also bridged the relationship with my parents. I mean, how could any grandparent refuse the love of a fuzzy, cuddly, soft grandbaby? And I dreamed of the day I could finally start classes again. That day came in the fall when I started as a full-time student. Now, I'm sure you've heard the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that was so true in my case. All my friends babysat for free. If they had not done that, I never would have made it through college. Carbondale's a rural area. You needed a car to get around. I didn't even have a driver's license. but all my friends with cars drove us to our urgent care and doctor's appointments, food shopping, and to the public aid office because they kept cutting off my aid. The only reason they would give is because they were trying to see if I still needed it. And for the first time in my college career, I went to all my classes. I did all my homework. I asked for help when I needed it. I took classes in the summer to make up for all the ones that I failed. I was on the dean's list for straight A's every semester. In 1991, I graduated with a 3.8 GPA. As my friends and family gathered in the balcony of the auditorium with Angelica, who is now 3, taking turns on all their laps, I could not help but let the smile shine and the tears flow. I know everyone's path in life is unique to them. We construct the narrative of our lives. Well, for me, I was on the 5-year, 1-child college plan, but I also know, as Robert Frost said, that has made all the difference. Thank you.